Welcome to people from the world, all over the world. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome everybody to what is now the 4th edition of the Capital Meets Policy Dialogue. My name is Navin Suri. I serve as an advisor to the board of directors for Elevandi. I expect to be your MC for the next 3 hours or so. I also request if you can all stay together, stay here. We have an absolutely jam-packed, deeply insightful agenda packed for the next 3 hours. Let me just get my slides. Okay. The Capital Meets Policy Dialogue was conceptualized for the very first time at the Singapore FinTech Festival last year. And we're very, very proud that in a matter of 10 months or so, the dialogue has now traveled from Singapore onwards to Africa on a topic which was totally relevant to the African subcontinent, and then onwards to Zurich, which is a topic which is relevant to the whole world, which is artificial intelligence. And it's no surprise that we today are going to talk about artificial intelligence as well. But it's important to share what is the entire purpose of the dialogue. Over the last 8 or 10 years, a lot of investment has gone into new innovations around the world. It's something which happens all the time. When an innovation takes root, it takes 2-3 years before capital providers come in, and they help scale that innovation. It takes maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 years after that for that innovation to begin to be visible in the market, whether it is in the B2B space or in the B2C space. At that point in time, policymakers begin to get involved with it, which could be somewhere between 6 to 8 years after the innovation came in for the first time. Policymakers can take 2, 3, 4 years before they put their arms around it, and then regulations come. And regulations take another maybe 2, 3 years to get formulated and then announced to be implemented. So the time from the innovation taking place to regulations coming out can be anywhere between 8 to 10, 15 years, by which time a lot of value has been already created with the capital that went in to power that innovation. There have been instances in the past 3-4 years where a lot of such value got suddenly destroyed with policies that came in, took a long time to get drafted and implemented. Crypto is an example, BNPL is an example. Is AI at the same place? We're very excited that over the course of the last 10 months, we've had some of the most sought-after voices globally who have given their vote of confidence to this particular program. They've come and spoken at length about what needs to be done, whether they are capital providers or whether they are policymakers. We have another very, very exceptional panel of speakers today, so I can assure you it's going to be absolutely worth our time. The topic for the day today is artificial intelligence, and it's not something that is a surprise. We have, I'm going to walk you through a little bit on the background of what has happened in 2023 from a capital provider's perspective as well as from a policymaker's perspective. We will have 2 very, very senior leaders who will give us a keynote each. One will talk about the capital provider's perspective. The other will be on the policymaker's perspective. And then we will break into 2 panels. The first panel will bring capital providers and policymakers together. And this will be to make sure that they're able to communicate to each other their expectations, their risks, their hopes, their aspirations. We then bring in a panel with innovators, because if you don't have innovators, there's really no need for policymaking or for capital providers. So we will have a session which will talk about what we call the voice of innovators. And then we will have a close for this morning's session with a very senior leader who will help make sense of where AI is likely to be going into next year. Let's quickly start with where are we as we speak? What has happened in the last 10 to 12 months? Clearly, we know generative AI has captured everyone's attention. It is something which has proven to be the fastest new technology adopted in the world ever. And you can see, in fact, it's gone faster than cloud, faster than even smartphones. And it's no surprise that all the big tech companies, whether it is Google or Amazon or Microsoft, IBM, they're all coming out with, or actually they did come out in the first half of this year, with a lot of large language models, foundational models. They started to absolutely inundate the industry. It was almost like if they didn't do anything on it, they're going to be left behind. And Satya Nadella actually said it correctly. He said that a race starts today. This is when he updated Bing. And we all will remember back in February this year, saying it's now new and improved and the shiny new toy, which is really, really up the mark and better than ChatGPT. Google, Sundar Pichai, I think they were left behind. And I think the best statement maybe he could make was, you have to build it responsibly. Because they were not ready. And when they came out with Bard, I still don't think I like Bard, but that's just me. But he also made an important statement that it's very, very critical that we regulate this correctly. Now, the question that it begs is the genie out of the bottle for AI? Has it already gone? And we cannot bring it back. As humanity, we have seen that happen with social media, that policymakers took 10, 12 years to rein it in, by which time it had already done what we all now accuse social media to have done, which is they've taken away all our data, they're doing all sorts of things with us, for us, against us, and should we hence be very, very careful this time around? And it's no surprise that all of these CEOs and founders like Sam Altman, for example, have said we need to bring in regulations really, really quickly. One very interesting statement made by nobody less than Yuval Harari, and I'm sure everyone knows about him. He said, I personally think he's a futurist, though he calls himself a historian. He said that there is an alien intelligence that has actually gone in and taken control. And he says, if I don't know whether I'm talking to a human, I'm engaging with an AI, it looks to be something very, very scary. Brookings, as an institute, as a think tank, added their voice to it. They said the challenge becomes, how do you protect the public? And it's a race where there is no referee at this point in time. And that is absolutely true. While there is an intention to have a referee and quickly, and Europe tends to take lead with this, and they have with the European AI Act that was announced very recently, but it's still going to take about 2 years before it gets implemented. The statement that scares me the most is one that came from Harvard, where they said, while we all say that there should be regulation, there should be control, there was a time very recently in the life of humanity where AI could have done so much more, could have done so much better. And that was at the tail end of the pandemic, where they said AI failed. All governments were willing to share data, AI didn't deliver. They said, instead, AI failed in so many different ways, and bad data sets, embedded bias and discrimination, errors, complexity, and finally, no global context. And how do you make sense of AI? And we think we are scared of it, we want it to work for us, but it really has problems. Margaret Vestager, who is from the European Commission, she said, if we end up in a situation where we can't believe in anything that we see, that clearly is the end of society. And this is the extreme view that we often hear. And it's no surprise that a lot of regulation has been passed in the last 2 to 3 years. And if you see the curve of this, The last bar is for 2022, but if we added 2023, I'm sure it will multiply in 3-4 times to what it actually shows here for 2022. So while a lot of governments are trying to put their arms around it, they are not in a very harmonized way aligning with each other. So if you see this particular chart, it talks about there are countries like Canada on this side which are focusing a lot more on more legislation, whereas you have countries at the bottom right who are more interested in guidelines as opposed to being very prescriptive about what you should and you should not do. It is something that a very important voice, Daniel Ek, the founder and CEO of Spotify, he said regulations, in effect, if you read the full article which came in the Financial Times, he's really saying that the model that regulators use today, policymakers use today, is broken. He says there is a need for policy making too to happen in real time. Now, I don't know how that can happen, but ultimately, that is where the direction of travel is likely to be, that in the next 8, 10, 15 years, there will be some method of doing policy making in real time. And it seems very alien, nearly impossible right now, but that's what he's talking about. Maybe a first step towards that direction is what happened about 2 weeks ago in the UK, where Rishi Sunak absolutely, and Sheldon is here, so from the FCA, he absolutely did a diplomatic coup, no question about it. Got China, US, and EU to agree on collaborating with each other on policy making, and nations have agreed that they want to test AI before it goes out. It's almost like the drug administration, where it takes 10, 15, 20 years before a drug is tested and approved for human consumption. And it doesn't end there. You also make sure that you keep tracking it after humans have started to consume it to make sure that it's not causing any trouble and you have to withdraw it. So it's quite clear that AI regulation and policy making is heading in that direction. Now, how long will it take? We don't know, but the longer it takes, the same genie has gone out of the bottle. It'll become very, very difficult to control it. While this is what we see from the policymaker side, let's take a quick peek on where do capital providers stand with this. We are in a capital meets policy dialogue. And to me, if I can summarize things, I think the VCs have a new label for their FOMO, which is AI. And if you look here, we've all heard stories where a presentation in Silicon Valley generates $20 million, $30 million in VC funding just with the idea. Here we had a company which had over $100 million written as a check, with nothing really. Salesforce has doubled its venture fund within 3 months of launching, and you've got a totally new style of supporting startups, which is not just with money, but with access to NVIDIA chips to do your modeling. Now, that is quite a differentiator for a venture capitalist, and I think it has now increasingly started to become a norm. It also begs a question, so is money going in big or is it going in small? It's going quite big. If you see hundreds of millions of dollars going into these companies, there's a whole bunch of new unicorns being born. And mind you, this data is only of 1 quarter, which is Q2 of this year. It has not, for Q3, the data has not come out. And one of the biggest voices, which is Mark Andreessen, spoke about what he thinks his vision is for the world for AI. And he's saying, don't control anything. He's saying, let it go. And it'll find its own level. It'll find its own regulation. It'll find its own policy. And he says, if you look at number 4, there should be no regulatory barriers to open source whatsoever. He wants this to be absolutely free. And he says that if AI is what innovators or bad actors are using, then governments should also use the same. Now, but how do governments do that? While you have capital providers making this sort of a statement at one end, if you look at policymakers at the other end, they're absolutely to the other side. They're, in fact, wanting to stop things that are currently in play around the world for the last 8, 10, 15 years. So they're talking about a ban on emotion recognition AI. This already exists. Real-time biometrics. This already exists. Social scoring. This has existed since social media came in. So how is it? And this is the reason why we think that a dialogue like this is important, that some messages go out, that value that has been created by innovators, capital over the last 5, 7, 8, 10 years cannot just be destroyed overnight. It cannot. Either you come in very soon or then hold your peace. It's difficult for policymakers. Why? Because they don't have the expertise. They do not know enough about what they should regulate. And so if you look at that first point which came out of Brookings, they said they don't have domain expertise. So how do you expect them to come up with regulations? They may take time, by which time the genie's gone too far. They don't know what to regulate. But they're coming up with broad, in-principle statements which say, do no harm. Don't be a black box. They're saying, you should be able to trace back and tell me, where did it go wrong? You should have an ability to explain that to me and make that correction, and then monitor it from there onwards. They're also talking about maybe there is a need for an overall global digital or an AI agency which tries to put some sense into this whole thing. Elon Musk at Bletchley Park just 2 weeks ago made an important comment. He said that you've got to start with insight before you do oversight. And that insight is a challenge for policymakers everywhere in the world. Mustafa Suleyman, who's the great mind behind DeepMind, and he's written a book. I stole this paragraph from there. It's a book called The Coming Wave. And he really says that we do not have the ability to solve this problem, which is every time new technology comes in, we want to use it. But we don't know what harm it can be, but we want to use it. We have an overwhelming demand for new technology, whereas regulations and policy making continues to suffer. So the question that we are trying to answer today over the next 3, 4 sessions is this, and I want to involve all of you as an audience, and give me a show of hands to those who think that we should slow down AI innovation. How many think we should slow down? The next question that I'm going to ask you is, how many think that we should accelerate policy making? So, accelerate policy making? Like nearly everybody. Slow down innovation? Like Suresh, you're alone. There's one more there. So, here we go. It's a live example of we want the technology. We don't want to slow it down, but we want policy making to come in, but there is no way for policy making to come in so quickly because they don't understand it as yet. There's another angle to this. Could we do both? Could we slow down innovation and accelerate policy making? And there's the last angle to this. Can we accelerate innovation and accelerate policy making? I think Daniel Ek was really talking about this, saying, let innovation go at the pace it develops for itself, but policymakers have to find a way to accelerate their policy making. And I don't know, I don't have the answer to that. With that little bit of a background, let's get started.